This is from Maine with Love, an Allagash brewing podcast where we talk about beer, our community here in Maine, and things that generally make us happy. I'm flying solo today. It was me talking with Celine Frueh, our HR director here at Allagash. Kind of all about HR. The crux of the episode is talking about, how we've made this list of best places to work in Maine for many years, basically since 2013. But I think it goes beyond that, of talking about what is kind of the purpose of HR, what's the foundation of a healthy company, and just how we use this survey and everything else. It's if you are even halfway interested in creating company culture, I think this is a really cool episode because we get into just a lot of the specifics around how we approach it, how it's ever changing, and how it's just kind of this constant work in progress to make sure people feel valued and that the company adapts with the with the people who work there. So if that sounds interesting to you, this is the episode for you. I'm joined here by Celine Frueh, our HR director here at Allagash. Hi, Celine.
Hey, Brett.
And this is Brett, senior communications specialist here at Allagash. And we're going to start, of course, with a secret question. So, Celine, what is the difference to you between a conference room meeting and a walking meeting?
Ooh, walking meetings are better. So walking meetings get you outside in the elements, and you can think better as you're moving. It's my preferred form of meeting.
Yeah, isn't there some psychological thing of as you walk and move, it's jogging your brain in different ways than if you were sitting sedentary and trying to think of new things? There's something creative about it, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I've never researched it. I just go with kind of how my brain works best. And there's something deadening about spending a lot of time sitting without movement.
Totally.
So, I like to build it into interviews too.
Yeah.
Walking interviews.
I think we might have done a walking interview back when I was interviewing a little while ago.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Well, so we're here today to talk about best places to work in Maine, and kind of a lot around that, what that designation means, what we kind of do with that survey, and also just kind of around, I feel like, company culture and everything like that we have here at Allagash. And I think it's a pretty fascinating subject, and I think, Celine, you have quite a bit of knowledge around it, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say. So I want to start really broad and say, so for the question being, what in your mind are the hallmarks of a healthy workplace?
That's a great question. I think first and foremost, it should be a place where people feel comfortable being their true self, their authentic selves. And, it's our responsibility running the company to try to create an environment where people do feel this sense of safety.
Sure. Yeah. I feel like that is a good foundation for it in general, because I think if you can't feel like yourself while you're working, how can you contribute in the same way?
Right.
Or give your full skill set to the job.
Totally. And just kind of building on that, this concept of a flat social hierarchy.
Oh, sure.
So, for practical reasons, you need sort of a structure for making decisions. Who's accountable for this? If there's a tough call to make, who's going to make it? But when it comes to just general worth and value of people's perspectives, truly everyone is equal. And so we just want a place where your coworkers and you feel like you can connect, and kind of whomever walks into a group of people hanging out after work, they're welcomed, and it just feels comfortable.
Sure. That's nice. Yeah. The question that raises for me is if you don't have the buy-in of the senior leadership team though, right? That's kind of impossible.
100%. You cannot coach someone into caring about employees.
Sure.
They either do or they don't.
Yeah.
And it was just evident to me in my first conversation with Rob before I even started working here that he got it.
Sure.
And so, he doesn't even realize how amazing it is because he has only, he just knows his natural instincts. But
Sure.
the fact that he wants to walk around, walk the floor, get into the field, ride with the sales team, stop by an HR happy hour if we're doing it in the tasting room and have shift beers with some of the brewers after work.
Yeah.
All of these natural instincts, it sets the tone.
Yeah.
And that just kind of trickles down where people feel like that's a good approach.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like there are so many examples of that sort of like, if you have a suggestion, make that suggestion no matter how like, new you are to the company, how senior, even if it's not necessarily your department.
Yeah.
Because I mean, most of the time that I've ever made a suggestion, it's like, yeah, we thought about that a lot and this is why we do it this way, but it's always a really good reason. Like,
Right.
it's
Right.
rarely ever like, yeah, nah, like dismissed out of hand, which I feel like is so important to feeling valued too.
Right. It is. And one of the things, I don't track this with data, but just anecdotally, this happens every year, is that a relatively new employee in a relatively kind of entry level or mid-level role has an idea about a better way to do something in their own department.
Sure.
And their manager says, wow, yeah, let's do it.
That's cool.
And then I hear about it or Rob hears about it and tells me. And I feel like, wow, if you can get noticed, if you're a packaging operator or, you work at the warehouse or you work in the tasting room and you have a better idea about how to do something and, the marketing team listens to that or leadership in the brewery ops department listens to what you have to say, like that seems like a healthy organization.
Totally. So speaking about healthy organizations, we've been taking this survey since 2013. It's called Best Places to Work in Maine. What is the start of that? How did that get started? How did we get involved with that particular survey? I guess, what's the origin?
Yeah. So before I worked at Allagash, I did HR consulting. And one of the realms that I ended up focusing on for a while was employee engagement surveys or exit surveys with large employers like Maine Med
Sure.
or other hospitals in the state. And through that kind of learned just the theory of data and how to use data, and it suggests things to you. It's not absolute truth, but it can suggest things.
Sure,
and
sure.
the more people that participate, the more you can trust the data and so forth. So I think it's a really nice counterpart to a lot of HR because a lot of HR is hunches, gut, that, you walk by a group of people, something doesn't seem quite right, or wow, that group of people seems really excited. So the data of a survey is a really nice complementary method to sort of assessing how folks are doing and pinpoint certain areas. So there are just, the people that do this exclusively professionally, there's just a series of questions that are considered best in class for assessing employee engagement. And so the Best Companies group, who administers the Best Places to Work survey, they're based in DC and they do surveys all over the country. They do it in every state. They do Outside Magazine. You see these other Best Places to Work contests. And most of them are really the same questions with a few things thrown in, right? So if Outside is doing it, they're going to ask a few things about, do you let your employees go outside?
Right.
But largely it's the same set of questions. So when I started working here and, heard about the survey, I thought, gosh, this is an amazing place to work. And so why not throw our hat in the ring? But also let's see what people really like best about working at Allagash, and also what are the pain points? Because the anonymity of a survey, it's administered by a third party. We only see aggregate data, but we don't see, Sam said this or Johnny said
this
that.
Individual person said that, yeah.
Yeah. So there's this level of freedom for employees where, that's what we encourage people to do, is to be really candid. Because if people are faking it, it doesn't help us at all.
Totally. Because I think that is the important point, and that's the part that I've kind of understood about this, and why I particularly thought that this was going to be a really interesting podcast, is that, like, it's not just a pat on the back. Like, we've made this, but it's like, it's the way in which it is implemented of saying, hey, look, we're doing so well in all these areas, but let's actually look at the place we're not doing well, you know, and then what do we do about that? And so, yeah, it just seems like such a healthier way to view that sort of a survey to actually help.
Yeah. And even, you know, there are all these multiple choice questions, and then there's a section at the end for comments. And the comments are so helpful because you can have high scores in a certain category, but if a few people have a concern of like, well, this is going well now, but I'm worried about preserving this as we grow.
Sure.
If you get a bunch of people with the same concern, then that's a good clue that, wow, okay, people are paying attention to this. This is a treasured part of working here. So let's pay extra attention to keeping this strong. And one of the most interesting parts about working at Allagash for me has been, you might have the same goal year over year. Like, let's say, for example, fostering a workplace where people know their coworkers and feel connected, and but the way you do that might change year over year. So when you're a certain size, right? So we were about 40 people when I started. Now we're about 160.
Yeah.
The way you kept people feeling connected at 40, 50, 60 employees didn't look exactly the same as it did.
Totally.
And then, of course, during the pandemic, it had to change again. Yeah. Not due to size, but due to the constraints of the health situation.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's like we don't replicate every year, and you know this from being here for a while, it's not that every year is just a replica of the past year.
Yeah. That's really interesting. There are two things in there, and I feel like the first one that I wanted to kind of dig into is do you have a specific example of an unexpected trend that popped up on the survey or something that appeared that then you had to take action to address? Is there something that you could share along those lines of like, oh, I didn't know people were thinking about that much, or, ooh, we really do need to work on that, and then we worked on it?
It's funny. The first thing that jumped to mind, and this is sort of a funny example, is, there are a lot of questions on the survey. There might be 80.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'd have to look that up, but there are quite a few. But all the questions aren't weighted equal in terms of experts' view of them. So there are about 12 that are considered like the most significant, and some are harder to change than others. And this is just a kind of an easy example. If someone is dissatisfied in the benefits section about, vision insurance, well, it's pretty simple to fix that, right? If we didn't have vision insurance, we brought it in, and now people are happy with the vision insurance. And that did happen,
That's cool.
But there are other things that are just really not necessarily solvable at all. Like if you have a group of people in a department and none of them like the type of work that they do, that's really hard to fix. And that sort of tells you, wow, we're not hiring the right type of people. And so early on in my tenure here, we had this pattern of a lot of folks who were like, wow, Allagash just sounds so cool. Like, I want to get my foot in the door.
Right.
And so we had a lot of positions and departments where folks would not really be interested in the particular job that was being advertised, but they just wanted the foot in the door. And then it led to like pretty quickly, people were like, thumbs down. I actually don't like it after all. And so it forced us in a good way to get better at explaining the job to candidates, to making sure that we were looking for people who had skills and interests that suited people in a particular role. So like in the packaging department, for example, we wanted folks who had interest in mechanical systems, because that's a pretty sophisticated machine out there. So it was less about, kind of a starry-eyed view of, wow, it would be cool to work at a brewery, and more about, wow, I really like, these certain things. And then looking for people who were interested in whatever it was. So in the tasting room, it would be people who like to talk about beer with guests.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's helpful.
No, that's totally helpful. And it also makes me think, because it goes back to what you were saying about that flexibility of, you have a plan, but then you can be flexible, because there's also the factor of like, people do move around within Allagash. And that is one of the sort of cooler parts about working here, is that you are not like, you're here or you're nowhere else. Like these positions, and
Yes.
honestly, like the investment in employees to learn and to take on new positions. I think there are a number of stories within the brewery of people
Right.
who started one
Right.
place and are now in another place that is, like, I'm thinking of Todd, our designer.
Right.
He started in the warehouse and then he went to school for design, and now he's designing basically everything you see from Allagash. That's Todd. And it's incredible. It's just so cool.
Exactly. And there are stories like that, all throughout the company, and that is so encouraging. It makes me think of the question you just asked me. And, for a time, there were some lower scores in the career advancement. The
Right.
perception of, if I do good work, I will be rewarded. I see potential for career advancement at Allagash. And those scores were pretty low for a while. And so we made a really concerted effort, actually, over the past 3 years. And it's an ongoing one. It's one that will never be done.
Yeah.
To post for every open position within the company. And so rather than managers saying, oh, there's this opportunity within the department, I think, Sally would be perfect. Let's just put Sally in that role. It's like, well, wait, what if there are other people that might be interested?
Yeah.
And so now we're really biasing toward posting for things. And that not only does it create a perception there that there's advancement, it actually creates opportunities for advancement.
Yeah.
And those scores are improving as a result. So
That's
yeah.
great. Because that's like feels like such a conundrum of create a good company culture so people want to stay for a long time, but then those positions that those people are in are not going to turn over, and so then you have people who want to, like, what do you do? So like that's just a really interesting way to solve for that.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of stuff in the HR realm where there's this tension between, retention is a goal. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And then if you have so much retention that no one ever leaves, then opportunities may be limited to just pure growth as opposed to growth plus backfilling.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It's a hard balance to strike, I'm very sure. Oh, yeah. So I think this kind of speaks to that question, but what are consistently some of the reasons people give for why they like working at Allagash?
Yeah. So one that really jumps out is working for Rob.
Huh.
So I think in today's world, every year more and more in a world of like mergers, acquisitions, people are selling and so on. Rob is a human that everyone knows.
Yeah.
So it's not working for a nameless, faceless corporation. It's not working for a conglomerate based overseas. It's a person that knows your name, that cares about your experience and your quality of life as an employee here. And so I think people find a huge value. I mean, that's part of the value proposition for sure. Yeah.
And I think within that, for me, a lot of it comes down to values and living values, and I think when you have, it's Rob, you can see Rob is going to live this value and his word has a big say in, what the company's doing, and having that confidence in him as a person and his values is like, that's huge for me. And I think that when you have that same situation of like with a board of directors or whatever, you can't really have that same confidence that the values are going to take precedence over the bottom line.
Right. Exactly. It's like if we walk through the brewery and see a group of people chatting briefly and having some laughs, like Rob looks at that as a positive.
Right.
Some owners would be like, what's going on here? Get back to work. But it's the opposite with Rob. Like there's so much trust that everyone works really hard. If somebody found 2 minutes to convene with a couple coworkers and enjoy a laugh, great, because they're having a good day at work. And it's this kind of long view on investment. And so when we expand the physical plant, we'll put in skylights, windows in the manufacturing facility. A lot of people don't do that because it's cheaper to skip those things. But Rob doesn't want people who work at Allagash to feel like they're beaten down. He wants people to feel like it's a good existence. Yeah.
It's a powerful thing. It is. It's nice when we do well as well. Like just like, the bottom line, like, we're a growing company, we're the healthy company. And it's just, I think in the marketing department, we are really aware of the power that was when we did tours, when people would tour the brewery, a very consistent takeaway that people would come away with was not necessarily just that, oh, the beer tasted great. It was like, whoa, these people are happy.
Right.
They're happy to be here. And like that was perhaps the most inspiring takeaway.
Yeah.
And so like, I don't know. It's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So
it wasn't even a question.
Yeah. No, it is. They're just, there's some things that really make Allagash different. And if you tour people around, most people pick up on something, even if they can't quite explain it, it stands out. Yeah.
And I think it's also one of those things where you don't see that in so many different places, that kind of seeing that like, oh, people can be happy working. It's like a cool thought.
Right.
It's an uplifting thought of like, well, maybe I could be happy with my job. And then you can look around and find something maybe that's better suited for you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then, I mean, other things that come back consistent are benefits.
Sure.
I think people they like the full spectrum of benefits that we offer. Mm-hmm. They feel like the company has their back in terms of, from expansive paid time off programs to support people at different stages of life, or, just sort of, this education benefit that we offer, different things that, we say we want to be a distinctive workplace, and benefits are the values in action, I think.
Yeah.
So if you're saying we want to be a certain type of employer and then you're really stingy with benefits, it's like this huge disconnect. So It's been fun over the years kind of adding and refining and kind of getting those in a place that feel like it sets the stage for a really inclusive workplace.
Yeah. And so my preamble to the next question is that I think I had a certain vision in my head before I came to work at a brewery of what it was like to work at a brewery. Mm-hmm. And I think it was very different than what I experienced when I actually came to work here. And I think that like, you think of it's beer. Everyone's going to have a beer at lunch. It's all, it's going to be this big like party all the time. And I think like, I'm glad it's not. I would not have been here for as long as I had been if it had been that way. But the question is, how does beer both help and potentially hinder our efforts at making this sort of a positive, inclusive workspace?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's something that we think deeply about on a regular basis. And so it's this wonderful opportunity for connection, right? Because it naturally can pull people together to sort of savor an experience together. Mm-hmm. At the same time, if it's used excessively, it can lead people down a really dark path. Yeah. And so we want to strike the balance of generosity around, help when people are making a product to let them enjoy it. Yep. And at the same time, we want to do our duty to keep people out of harm's way or educate people about potential issues that we could have. Yeah. And so we've made a big push over the past few years to shift away from the idea that everyone's going to enjoy beer. Like everyone who works at Allagash should be a beer aficionado. Yeah. And that's helped us in a bunch of ways because I think it's made the workplace feel more inclusive and less like intimidating for folks who might even like beer but just don't feel like they're a beer geek. Mm-hmm. And, people choose, we have very long tenured employees. People choose to stop drinking at various times for all different reasons. Mm-hmm. And they are still wonderful contributors to Allagash. And so we've kind of, figured out that if you care deeply about the part of your work that you're doing, mm-hmm. it really doesn't matter. So it's like an invitation if you want to be part of sharing a shift beverage and drink beer, great. But also we always have non-alcoholic options so that people don't feel like it's a tap water versus beer situation. Yeah. And we've found some good partnerships with education around mindful drinking and healthy alcohol habits.
I was thinking with Wellspace. Yeah. That's a huge one.
Yeah. No, those have been fascinating. Yeah. We've got such interesting, smart employees, and so they tend to really like to explore and learn. Mm-hmm. So it's very gratifying to bring a subject to the company or to a particular department and have people really embrace it and be all in for those 90 minutes to try to examine their thoughts and their habits around alcohol and how that might be serving them or not serving them. And do they want to make any changes?
Yeah. Could you explain that WellSpace partnership a little bit? Because I feel like this ties in with that of just, mindful alcohol habits and also just like mental health in general and really honoring that as an important part of the benefits package.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the pandemic was such a challenge, but it also allowed us to kind of make progress in certain areas that we had maybe been kind of trying to chip away at over the years. It's super important to me for a whole host of reasons that mental health just be something we can all talk about comfortably, the same way if, I twisted my ankle and I needed some accommodation, I would not fear that people would think I was less than because I had an injury that affected, a physical part that, people struggle from time to time. And so it was kind of a conscious effort to go from thinking that you either did or didn't have a mental illness to more like this is norm for the human condition. We all have struggles from time to time.
Yeah.
And when we have struggles, we should feel like we can get help when we need it. We entered into this partnership with WellSpace in July we started working with them, like drawing up the agreement in July of 2020. It was during the kind of supply chain crisis of COVID, realizing our team is going to struggle like everyone else in the United States and around the world is struggling. And we want to try to find a pathway to reduce barriers to mental health counseling for people that are struggling. And so this partnership gives people quick access to a set of clinicians. And the virtual aspect of it made it really easy for our remote team that's all over the country to also use it if they wanted.
That's right. Yeah, so, that's really cool.
Yeah. And then through that, we just did some webinars. They started as webinars because of COVID, and now we bring folks in on site. But when there's a topic that many people have expressed interest in, like seasonal affective disorder, we'll just say, hey, this is a thing when you live in Maine. Let's gather and just share strategies. So I think it's been a healthy change.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's just like, and especially knowing it can be really hard to find a therapist or something, even if you're looking for them. And like even taking that step to look, I feel like is a big personal sort of decision. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a really powerful part of the whole package and a cool thing that I've definitely valued. So in addition to this WellSpace benefit, we have some other sort of unique benefits to us as a brewery, and I think potentially to us as a business, of like these sort of milestone perks of being here. There's a 5-year trip and there's something that happens after 10 years. Could you just talk briefly about what those are?
Yeah. So, our intention is to have long-term employment relationships with people. That's our goal, is that we cultivate a workplace that is interesting enough and supportive enough and exciting enough that people want to stay 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And it's such an honor, but it's also a responsibility. I mean, there was one year, I think this was even pre-pandemic, where several people in their early 30s or late 20s said to me, or they wrote in their self-reviews, I hope to retire at Allagash. Whoa. And Rob and I were like, whoa. I mean, that's serious. It's so major and so different. And so during the pandemic, it was like, wow, I mean, we've got to keep this ship going because this, enables the livelihoods of so many people. So as part of that, there's this part of our culture that I think reflection is sort of absent from. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people will literally quit jobs just so they can catch their breath, take a break.
Yeah.
Like things, they're just not sure that, something is changing in their life and whatever. And so a sabbatical is such a fun benefit to offer. So that's what we do. We offer this sabbatical, which is 4 weeks totally paid, and you can add 2 weeks of vacation time onto it for a total of 6 weeks. We do that at 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and so on, so that people don't have to, if they've always wanted to go to, on a trip somewhere special and they need extra time, like they want to go to India for a month. We don't want people to make the choice of either I have to quit my job or give up on this dream that I've had all this time. But a lot of people use their sabbatical in a totally different way. They just relax at home with their families. Or some people will do a home improvement project. There's no there's no expectation. There's no, it's really up to each person to choose what would be the most, how they would want to spend the time, but it allows for this opportunity to reflect a little bit on your life.
Yeah. And one of the cool parts of the sabbatical, from my perspective, is like how it's such an awesome tool to stress test the health of your organization.
100%.
Because if you take away one person and everything breaks, like something's not working there. So
exactly.
We've experienced that on the marketing team, because we're not a terribly big team, and we've had a sabbatical or two, and it's like we made it through. It was all good, but it's interesting how that works.
Exactly. And so that's the other component of it is, so at first I was talking about how it could benefit individuals. The way it benefits the company is exactly that. And it's succession planning. So it's a way to get information out of someone's head and become more institutional knowledge. Because really the goal is to create an organization that any one of us could be removed at any time for any reason, and the company would be okay.
Right. Yeah.
Just the kind of worst case scenario, right? Somebody's in a car accident, whatever it is, where suddenly we can't get access to that person. What happens?
Yeah.
So that exercise, it's also a great way if we encourage managers to, rather than delegate up to their boss to cover things while they're gone, to delegate down. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So that gets at the succession planning concept of getting people comfortable with, trying things a little bit outside of their comfort zone that they haven't done before. And every once in a while, someone does something while their manager's away and they do a great job, and the manager says, you know what, why don't you keep that?
Yeah,
and that's like career development for that person.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So I think rounding this out, and we kind of touched on this, but not in super depth. How do you said it was it's a constantly evolving goal of keeping the good parts of the culture. Mm-hmm. Are there any sort of ways that you found that you can that work across the board to keep those good parts of the culture as you grow? Is it just vigilance? Is it how do you keep that culture?
Yeah. I mean, a big one is communication.
Yeah.
So, early on, I pitched to Rob, can we do a newsletter? Mm-hmm. And it's, you know it well.
Yes.
And you, Matt, helped me with the original template for it.
That's awesome.
in MailChimp. But so we call it the Newsflash.
Yeah.
And at the time, I remember talking about it in a leadership meeting, and people said, do you really think we need a weekly newsletter? I mean, what do we have to say? Is there enough going on a weekly basis? Well, hilariously, 10 years later, literally, this little weekly newsletter is still alive and kicking. And it just has it was helpful in establishing, kind of setting the tone that communication is something that's important to the company. We have tons of information that we want to share with you. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's not the only way, right? We do these all-staff meetings. We do department summits. We have, a Q&A forum where people can ask the leadership team anything, and that's kept confidential.
Yeah.
So we have lots of ways that we communicate with people, but that, I think, does so much for keeping it feeling small in the healthiest meaning of that word, where you know what's going on. Things that affect you know about, but also things that are just a company goal, a company objective. We share more about big picture strategy, I think, than most companies do, and people seem to like it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm a Newsflash fan. I like to save it for honestly kind of after work or in the morning if I have my cup of coffee. Because it's substantial. It is a lot of information, and there's some really good stuff in there that I wouldn't know about because I maybe wasn't there, wasn't seeing it happening, and so it's cool. And there's also in speaking about communication, there's this sort of another tension between timeliness and also completeness of information that I feel like we're always dealing with, especially for bigger decisions. So how do you navigate that?
Well, Brad, if I had a good answer for that, I mean, I think it's just this kind of ever-changing thing. And we're probably at a zone right now where we're kind of rethinking some things, and, we'll probably change things up a bit for next year. Yeah. But people love, I mean, it's one when people are so interested in what's happening around them and what's happening in other departments, and it's such a healthy form of engagement.
Yeah.
And I think it also lends great credibility if you have to communicate bad news, that you have this like reliable, trusted relationship of communicating.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have to come in and say, bad news, there's a pandemic, we have to close everything down, for a certain amount of time, they're
ready for it.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
in a way that they've come to expect. And
exactly.
So, yeah, totally. Yeah. It's not just jarring to get an email in your inbox that you've never seen before.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
right.
That's great. So my last question, it's kind of like my first question, but I guess this is maybe more personal. What is success for you in HR?
I think surprising people in a good way.
Huh.
Because many people come either with no idea what HR is, or they've had a terrible experience with HR.
Yeah.
And so when you can show people that you have their best interests at heart, that you take when they're willing to share with you honest things and take that so seriously and keep things confidential that should be confidential, help people when they need help. I think that's always so fulfilling for me or anyone on my team of like, cool. Yes, we kind of, there's this stereotype, right, from like Office Space or like Dilbert or whatever out there. And we don't want to be that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
That's great. How many people are on the HR team at this point?
It's a big team.
Yeah.
And it's an unusually big team. And I think it speaks to kind of the wide scope of HR, where we do internal, this very comprehensive internal communications program, and then all of the perks and rec events that we do that just foster small groups getting together to have fun all the time. Mm-hmm. But it's a department of 6 of us now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
It's appreciated. All you do. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks, Celine. This fulfilled all of my expectations of being super interesting and just like, thank you so much for taking the time.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
This has been an Allagash Brewing production. And if you have something you want us to talk about on the show, shoot us a message at podcast@allagash.com.